All right. So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to
Good
another
afternoon.
episode of Curious Success. This is episode 17, part two. Of course, I am the key contributor, Rashim, and I have my guests who were for part one coming back. So, if you want to just briefly introduce yourself and go around and, and just pretty much speak to like, just what is your mood coming into this discussion?
All right, I'll go first. Emilee Bolero-Despagni, known Rashim for quite some years, since 2007. I'm a corporate recruiter here in New York City, and I feel like my mood is kind of hopeful today. So I don't recall what my mood was a couple weeks back when we recorded part one, but that's what I'm feeling today. So hopefully we can tap into that further.
My name is Marisa Bolero, and I'm a dance educator, and I have a small independent dance company called Bolero Dance in New York City. I'm a choreographer and a director, producer, and today I'm feeling really motivated. I feel like I sort of had this kind of, I went back to work this week and started a grad school program, and there's been a lot going on. And today I feel like I kind of got over that little hump of getting back into the swing of things. And I feel like there's a lot in my brain. I feel really active. So I'm feeling hopeful as well.
Cool beans.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Anella Benjamin. I'm a transit supervisor, and I am feeling hopeful and energetic today. Got a lot done during the week, so and there's still a lot more to do, but I just have a great energy today.
Nice.
Awesome. I'm Dave Baxter. I work in capital planning at Morgan Stanley. I'm feeling some end of summer, but very hopeful vibes to get back to New York City. It's the longest I've been away from New York City in a very long time. We've been here on Cape Cod and the islands for 7 weeks. And so motivated and excited to kind of get back to the city and kind of, get a new routine back, in this environment. So it'll be interesting. So motivated for that.
All right. Everybody got something going on. I guess my mood is excited, optimistic, and definitely looking forward to see how this conversation goes second time around. But yeah, that's where I'm at. Live from Pennsylvania, so out of New York. But yeah, I'm looking forward to see how the conversation goes today, and I'm sure it'll be just as constructive as as our last conversation. So let's start off. I think there's recent representation of this first question we're going to start off with that's just been happening in the news. It doesn't seem like there's not going to be continued conversation around these issues. There's going to, of course, be mixed views, perspectives that people have regarding this situation. So starting off first with these social injustice issues. Have they impacted your way of life, your culture? What are your thoughts around these social injustice issues that have been happening recently? Yeah, let's start there. Matter of fact, hold on. Forgot to mention, because I should have mentioned this earlier. So once again, this is part two of episode 17, and the topic is functioning through dysfunction as we deal with our present times. So once again, the question is focusing on how are you, I guess, trying to process these recent social injustice issues? Have they impacted your way of life? In what way? And how do you feel like maybe the response has been thus far to them?
I'll take a stab. I feel like it's like an 8-part question. It's interesting. I feel like, I feel all sides of my person have been impacted by this. And this is the first time, though, these issues have been just ongoing. I feel like, I love the other night, Joe Biden said that he was talking with George Floyd's daughter. He made some comment last week at the DNC that he said that he leaned down to her and she said something like, "Daddy changed the world." And I feel like there's this like tipping point, this thing that happened, that it was suddenly like people were no longer just going to be like internalizing feeling sad or feeling sorry or, oh, that's really unfortunate, but people were actually going to get active, people who were not active, you know what I mean? And so I feel like as just a person, as a human being, some things that I've been doing since the start of this sort of motivated time has been to look at my personal relationships with people and to actually start to talk to people in my circle who are not white, and to actually like find a shaky voice. These conversations started out really uncomfortably about like, I'm a white straight woman with this perspective and this experience, and you're not, and let's like actually start talking about this stuff. And I'm sort of stunned that, a lot of friendships, like even a friendship with you, Rasheen, that we've known each other for, I don't know, 12 years or something. And it took a global pandemic and a social revolution for us to start talking about the fact that we come from very different places and that we look like different humans. And so in turn, we're treated incredibly differently. And we've never addressed that before. So that's sort of like my humanness side, like who Marisa is as just a person, is starting to pay attention and to think more critically about my relationships with people in my circle, and start to ask those uncomfortable questions and to really listen. And then sort of on the other side of that, as a choreographer and as a, artistic director of a dance company, part of our company's mission is titled See, Move, and Share. And we're about engaging, and I'm a self-proclaimed community builder, and I've always cast a wide net, and I'm always like, everyone come, everyone's welcome, engaging all these people. And throughout the pandemic, I've been hosting conversations with dance educators or hosting conversations for collaborators, open classes. And I've started to realize that most of the people who show up to those things are white people. And I'm now looking deeply inside as an artist and a director and a maker to think, I'm saying these words, but people might not be hearing them in the way. They might not think that I'm actually talking about, like, I want you to come to this, and so as an artist, I'm trying to now think about how to shift, to shift my actions so that they identify more with what I want to be receiving and who I want to be in my community as an artist. And then I would say the other side of that too is as an educator. I mean, like right here next to me, I've been reading this book, How to Be Anti-Racist, which has been a fabulous read if no one has started it yet. It's like such a great book. And I've started to really think about my teaching practices, engaging students. And again, I've always had this sort of like, I want to be an inclusive educator and I want to be supporting all of my students, but what does that really mean? And there's a difference between saying those words and then actually taking action, or being transparent with your students about what it means. And again, identifying, like, as a white educator, this is my perspective. And something that's really struck me about this book that now is sort of at like the forefront of my brain, is that there's a difference between being like not racist and being an anti-racist. And I've been, this morning I was actually sort of thinking about this because, people are, if you're Catholic or Jewish or whatever you are, but you're not really practicing, you're just sort of not religious, but you still like anchor in those values. And so I was sort of thinking this morning that it's like someone's like, oh, are you religious? Not really, right? But someone who's like an atheist has an active stance that they don't believe in a set of faith-based practices. And so I've been sort of, that kind of has been coming into a clarity for me, that it's not that I'm just, oh, I'm not racist. I don't treat people these way. I don't judge people or do those things that those racist people do, but that we are now being charged with being anti-racist, which means that you take action to actually oppose that thing. And so I feel like it asks people to engage in a much more active way, in a much more vocal way, and using the power and the privilege that you may have with your circle or your job or your community, and to take more action and to feel like fired up and charged about that. So personally, I've been reading as much as I can. All summer long, I've been attending webinars, having conversations, reading articles about white supremacy in dance education, and how to develop anti-racist teaching practices and how to be an anti-racist institution. So this is all like very like bursting out of my brain, and I've been deep inside of it. So I'm glad to be starting the conversation about it today.
Well, and something that I would say that Marisa just mentioned, which I think is what kind of is being brought under the microscope now, is that it's not about individuals treating people poorly. I mean, I think that that's just like just being a disrespectful human being. But what it really is bringing the attention to is that it's this systemic issue that is built and baked into the fabric of our society. So for me, I think, kind of similar to what you're saying, Marisa, but it's just to almost now take a step back for me to acknowledge, do I want to be at organizations where I look around the room and everybody looks like me? No, I actually don't. I don't think that is allowing me to professionally develop, personally grow. And I would never maybe have even recognized that, because I think it was just like, doing and conducting business as usual. And so I think, Marissa, to your point, that it's like, if you're just kind of complacent and you're accepting things as they are, that's kind of in that bucket of like, yeah, no, like I don't do that, but I'm just going to kind of sit on the sidelines and let it happen, versus I want to take an active and engaged role in my own life of like, who are the people that I'm surrounding myself, whether it be personally, professionally, in these extracurricular activities that you involve yourself in. So I would say that that's kind of what I've taken a little bit more of a look at, which I otherwise wouldn't even have had that, I wouldn't have had that discomfort within myself to say, whoa, this isn't right. And I don't want the rest of the chapters of my life to be kind of just in this little box, based on kind of where I was raised, how I was brought up, and, and all those kinds of things.
I'd like to, add on to what everyone's saying. I had made like a statement a couple years back that maybe there should be a book to teach people how not to be racist. And I didn't know there were books out there to help people, to teach them not to. I mean, I've experienced racism both in my country, from Trinidad, and also here in America. And because I'm not racist and I view people as people, and my belief system is different too. To me, I only think there's only one race, that's the human race. And we're all made up of different cultures, because you could be white and be raised by a black family and have a complete different perspective, right? So what it is that we're unacceptable culturally. We're unacceptable of our cultures, of our way of being, of our way of speaking, of our way of thinking and talking, and that's what it is. And I have this funny way of thinking. If an alien race came down from wherever and they came to Earth,
There are
okay,
aliens.
yeah, okay, there we go. So all right, I just want to make sure.
It's been the
You
reports out.
understand? Then we'll get it. And if an alien race came down and they say I have to harvest humans to load their mothership or something, then we'll finally realize that we're all humans. There are not different races, right? And I forgot who made up races, and we all got categorized into different categories, black and white and Asian, and what's the other race, quote unquote?
Well, Asian Pacific, right? Isn't that one?
Asian Pacific. I can't keep up, right?
Yeah.
There's
But
only
you're right.
one
But
race.
it's
It's
ways to
culture.
differentiate people. Yeah.
Right. It's just culturally different. Because I could be speaking to a young black man who was raised by a white family, right? And his perspective might be completely different because of his environment and how he was raised. But one thing he does face is he will face people who will judge him because based on the color of his skin. And that's the difference. And that's what I think people don't really understand, and it's hard for humans to understand when you put yourself, it's really something that you have to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to genuinely understand what they're going through. Because when I walk down the street as a black woman, you might not see, hear, feel the things, that I'm feeling and that I'm going through. And you walking down the street as a young white woman might be seeing and hearing and feeling things differently. And that's what it is. And it's tough. I'm glad there's a book that teaches people how to, I don't know how the book reads. I'll probably check it out myself, but hopefully it teaches people how to just put yourself in another person's shoes, because that's the only way we'll understand, and I it's always been going on. When I say that, um, young black men, young Hispanic men getting either from search back in the 90s, they're getting searched, stopped. I know my husband walking down the street to pick me up from, wherever, if I'm at the train station, he'll get stopped by police like 2, 3 times. Where you going? But this is a block that he's lived on all his life, and it's ridiculous. And I've been around my white friends, my Caucasian friends, and they've been running havoc and wreaking havoc, and stuff has been going on, and they're doing things and nobody stops them. So it's I'm telling you, it's just the person's perspective and what's been going on in their life. I'm just glad it's getting highlighted now. I think we all have the ability to, this is a turning point that we could either turn to greatness or just repeat history and just shun away to the past. Because as more people educate themselves and grow and realize that we're people, and what's the difference is that we're culturally different, it will be okay. But I'm just glad everyone's making an effort to do that, because that's what's needed.
I ask you something, Anella. As a parent of black children, do you have any concerns?
Of course. I mean, I would love to have a son, but thank God I don't have a black son. But I have 2 black daughters that, I make them, my eldest now is 10 years old, so I make her very much aware that she is a black woman. Um, and I make sure she has a lot of pride and a lot of self-respect. I make sure she knows that she is beautiful. I say that to her all the time, because that's something that, based on her differences, and all the day-to-day information that she gets, it doesn't favor who she is as a black woman. So I have to make sure and instill that in her. Um, when she's at home, also political views, how we express ourselves in our home is not how I tell her to watch how you speak and watch who you speak to, because she's a child. And I don't want to load her up 10 years old. She's already loaded her up because she's very loaded up because she's very opinionated. But I have to tell her, be careful of who you speak to when it comes to your own political views and your own viewing, because not everybody's going to like that. And not everybody's going to agree with you. And some parents might differ. Oh, no, let them voice their opinion, freedom of speech. I listen, it's called being a parent, and telling them to be cautious about how they speak is a part of parenting. When they become an adult and they want to express themselves more, evenly in that respect, okay, because they'll have to be accountable for whatever circumstances that they are in. But as a child, I have to teach her how to just be humble and just be careful who you speak to, and just to know that not everybody is going to like you, and not everybody is going to view you as just being you. And she gets it. She gets it. It's so surprising the words that come out of my 10-year-old's mouth. She'll say, "Mommy, you, yeah, because I know the world is it's evil." She said that to me one time in a discussion. And I said, "Oh, how do you figure that?" I don't change her thinking. I want to see where her thought process is. Like, I said, "Who is evil?" And she told me. She said, "Well, police people." So innocently, right?
Mm.
And I said, "Explain to me what, why do you think that police people are evil?" I said, "But look what's happening." She goes, "Look what's happening. They hurt that man on the street, um, and I don't like how they beat people up." So in her mind, as a 10-year-old, she thinks all police people are evil. And that's honestly what is being portrayed, right? Even if that's not the fact, that's what's being portrayed. So now she has a fear of police, right? So should I tell her anything differently? Like, oh, police, you shouldn't fear police, or you shouldn't. No, you have to be cautious. You do. You have to be cautious, because the times that we're living in, and the times that she's always been, but we've always been living in our neighborhood, in our world, she's had to have that mentality. She's had to have that guard, so to speak, to where, okay, that policeman has a loaded weapon and he's carrying it on his person, and for some reason he might not like you. That's it. Be humble and be respectful. And I have to say that to my 10-year-old in these times. And you would think, oh, in New York, da 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 da. Nope. A lot of the cases are happening right here in New York. So you gotta train your children for whatever it is. And people will probably say, oh no, you shouldn't teach her to fear police. I have to. I have to. Not all fish in the sea will bite you, but that don't mean that I'm not gonna train my child not to be cautious when it comes to fish. Not all chickens will pick you, but I'm not gonna be like, oh, stick your hand in the chicken coop and they won't hurt you. They might be nice to some other people, but they might not be nice to you, and
And,
that's the reality.
and that's a sad reality
It is.
because they're supposed to be here to serve and protect. So it's like
Correct.
you being a parent, and of course, being their first, their first role model and a figure of authority, for them within the household, and then where they look at other authority figures, and this is one of the authority figures that they might see, in various spaces, whatever the case, they should not feel like they need to fear that authority figure, you know, and that's a definite sad reality that would have to be the way that you would have to talk to your child in terms of just like kind of like just giving themselves up, you know, even if they should know their rights and know how to advocate and speak up for themselves, but knowing that even if they actually show, oh wait, you like, are you showing me attitude? Are you trying to be sassy in this moment?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden that leads to attitude giving back, and then it can turn out to be excessive force or whatever, in the process of that person probably being assaulted, arrested, or whatever.
Right. And as a parent, listen, like this, that you touched on a very uh, specific thing with people in authority, right? People in authority have to know not to catch offense real fast. And I think that's what's going on when it comes to police. Every little word is said to you is offensive to you. And because of you're offended now, you think somebody is testing your authority or defying your authority. As a parent, when you have children, this is something that you have to know. Your children are going to test you. and they're going to come out of pocket. They're going to come out, but you have to not react to their, what is it? Their attitude. And you cannot be offensive. Because the moment I be offensive, if tell my 10-year-old to go pick up her toys, right? And she has an attitude like, oh, I don't want to pick up my toys. I don't want to do this. Why? And if I react to her attitude, then I'm going to get offended. Like, why is she opposing my authority? And as a parent, I have to think, oh, well, maybe she's tired, or maybe she's hungry. And as a parent, because I know I'm her authority, I could think like that because I have the ability. I'm a trained professional. I'm a trained professional as a parent. She's a child, right? So I now have to say, she's not opposing my authority. She's not saying that she doesn't want to do it. She's questioning why. Well, honey, we can't have toys all over the place. I'm so sorry. Okay, this is how it's supposed to be, blah, 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 blah. If you want, I can help you. You want me to help you? Okay. And then she'll do it. But police don't do that. There's police out there. You tell them, they tell you to do X, Y, and Z. You question their authority. One, two, three. They become offended.
Yeah,
All
and now it's like,
professionalism fly out the window. All the professionalism is gone. They go back in their mind. They're like, I'm a chief of this. How dare this person question my authority? How dare this person do something and that's what it is. And that's why everything just flies off the handle, and don't forget it if you're a black person. That's it. You know? I'm sorry.
yeah. Well, the thing I was going to also add, you were talking kind of in kind of referencing kind of the parental authority, authority versus, and it kind of comes to me about the importance of like de-escalating a situation. And that's kind of, I think, what, is like what trained professionals, as you say, are, teachers are supposed to de-escalate. Police enforcement, de-escalate a situation. A parent, you de-escalate the situation. But that's what just kind of came to mind that I think is not being done. And I think you're absolutely kind of spot on with that.
Yeah, and it's just too much of it's going on. And that's where it goes back that whole system, the whole police system, the training, everything needs to be revamped, needs to be looked at, evaluated. It's been established for years, and it's been in play for years. And the only way that it's going to change is if they take a deeper look. Nobody thought that stop and frisk would stop. And I forgot what year it stopped, but I know I was amazed because they had stopped and frisked my brother, my husband. They were going stop and frisking crazy. And the mentality is that we thought it was just going to be a way of life forever. Forever. So I don't think this should be a way of life. It's something that's been going on for long. So I think that eventually that whole police system, everything needs to get looked at and revamped. That's the only way. Because even police speak about it. Even police, they come on Facebook, and they're pissed off. They're like, yo, for all the racist police out there, you don't know how to de-escalate a situation. You don't know how to talk to people. You don't know how to do this. You're basically a loser, and you're a disgrace to. I have law enforcement in my family. A disgrace to law enforcement everywhere. I have people. My family members are in the military. It's just a certain way when you hold that level of authority. I'm a supervisor. You think I'm going off of a gun? If my agent says something or questions my authority? No, I love when they question my authority. That gets me to think on my feet to answer that person with words, right? And to understand where that person's coming back. Okay, I'll let you guys take over.
And Anella, I would just say, because I love this this idea of people with authority holding power, right? And you're specifically talking about law enforcement and that sort of portion. And I think that for me right now, I'm thinking about the authority that I have as a teacher. Like something this summer that I really realized is I may not hold a loaded weapon on my person, but I hold information, and I hold, I make decisions about what is taught to my students. And that to me is like immensely powerful. And I think about how, corporate culture and like all of these institutional spaces hold the power and the authority. And we're seeing it because, if you have a loaded weapon, obviously you can do physical, like irreparable physical harm on someone. But we've been examining at the school where I teach our longstanding, pedagogical practices about how students have felt under hurt, not heard, underrepresented, that their, perspective has not been valued, and that can actually do the same kind of irreversible damage. The person's not physically harmed, but they are emotionally shattered. And then they become an adult and they think, this teacher never supported me. This school didn't have my back when I stepped forward and made, comments about how I was feeling. And so I think we've been seeing it under the microscope in this very violent way, with police violence. But I think that if we actually sort of flip it and look at that kind of emotional, like social emotional perspective in corporate culture, education, like all of these other spaces, that we have a ton of work to do. How many Black CEOs are there, male or female? How many Black owned businesses? That this is just something that's not, if those people are not in powerful positions to help guide, down through the pipeline, then it's going to be tough. We have a lot of work to do in those other spaces.
Baxter, I feel like you've been ready to add something for a little while.
Yeah, I think that everybody's made a lot of good points, and I want to kind of bring it back to Rashim. I talked about kind of some of the things that I've been doing, and I kind of what one of the things that Marisa said that resonated with me was, when you brought up the example using religion, and to me it's kind of about like being mindful and the intention behind that. And so one of the things that I've talked to Rashim about this is like where I'm spending my time. And I think that, as this group knows, we talked about it last time, that I've, been on the board of Streetwise and been involved with Streetwise for some time. I've recently taken the decision to kind of step back from that and focus on another nonprofit, and really just being mindful about the ways that I'm spending my time and making sure it's having a direct impact in the ways that I want to have an impact. It's very easy sometimes to be associated with an organization and sit on the board, fundraise, be an advocate, but at the same time, kind of you lose that connection. And I think in the past several months, I've spent more time with Streetwise trainees, and even with the constituents of the other nonprofit I'm involved with, Kings County Tennis League, than I have in a while. And it's really just to make sure that, like, feeling that connection and making sure that I'm actually using my time and what I'm able to do in the right ways. So I've spent more time one-on-one with a number of trainees. I've spent, I've joined our buddy program with this other nonprofit, and, connecting with not just like a student, but a family, and trying to use those opportunities to kind of really make sure that the way that I'm using my time is intentional and doing it in ways that's meaningful.
Yeah, and I think ultimately using your power and your privilege to model, but then to also advocate for those people. It's interesting you say that, because I'm just suddenly thinking about when at the start of the pandemic, when all of this racial injustice was really brought to the forefront of, like, people had the time now to suddenly lean in and actually take action. My undergraduate, I went to SUNY Brockport, and a lot of alumni students were posting all over Facebook, like, why are we not being supported? No one from the college or from the dance department is reaching out to us, checking in on us, or, that there was, there's like inequity around university programming. For instance, like in a dance department, there are certain classes that are required, like ballet, modern dance, this, that, and the other thing. And then there are these sort of other categories where if you want to, you can take African dance. If you want to, you can do this. And so, looking at how the students were sort of like, this in itself, by our programming having this kind of hierarchy, you're not supporting us as students. And so at any rate, you know, all of these students got together and they created a sort of parallel organization called Brockport Dancers Against Racism. And I connected with one of the undergraduate students that I knew, and she reached out, you know, we had been having these conversations, and she said, you know, could you be one of our anchor donors, and can you, you know, help work with this? And so this is like an example, and I love that you mentioned this, Dave, about how, you know, it's like now it's my turn to meet with the college with like the fundraising perspective of the college and say, yeah, like let's have scholarships for Black students. Let's have scholarships for those students to come to our campus to enrich our community. But also, you know, students are limited by their ability to grow and to thrive if they don't have the resources or the family support or those structures in place for them to be able to pursue and to grow. And so those things weren't in place at the college. And so now it's like, we are armed, you know, as like a white alum, I am armed by saying like, actually college, actually dance department, these things matter. And like, I am going to now be an advocate to say, let's find ways to do this. And then in turn, that will, like Emilee's saying, you know, bring more of a varied perspective to the people that we surround ourselves with, you know, because if you're just doing it in the same way over and over and over again, the same people are going to come, and then you have the same conversation and all of that. And I think, you know, ultimately what it sounds like you're talking about is actually taking time to get to know people and to actually like listen to their story and to not just go, okay, well, that, you know, that's unfortunate, or, oh, write a check and like, here, I've done my part, but to actually like get in on the front lines, like be the person marching alongside or holding the sign, you know, for that person, and really like being, you know, coming down. It's like when you talk to a kid and you kneel down to get on their level so that they feel like they trust you and that they really, you know, you're not an authority. So it's like, in a way, finding how from each one of our various perspectives, we can like get on the level with someone who doesn't have our same story, and to really
Reach a common ground.
yeah, and like really humble yourself and be like, I don't know your story, so like I'm gonna turn my voice off and you can share it.
Yeah.
A lot of, oh, go ahead, Prashant.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that, and a lot of it for me too as well, is, you know, especially having a 9-month-old daughter, like, you know, making sure that like when you do spend time that you're being as intentional as possible and bringing energy in the right ways. And it's very easy sometimes to just stay involved or kind of be on the emails and do those kind of things. And I'm trying to make sure that when I do spend the time, that it's intentional, that you're making sure your voice is heard in the ways that you want to be. Because I think that, you know, all of this, I think, is I'll raise a lot of questions about how we use our time, you know, over the past 6-7 months.
Well, and it's, I mean, sorry, Rashim, I feel like we're still on the first question. And so maybe this is then just like, we're
No,
like
no
riffing,
worries.
we're like riffing with each other, I think. And
I'm
bringing
not
up
actually going to shift to another question in terms of like what I have prepared, because I have other questions based on what we just discussing, but I have something else I want to share after you share what you share. Okay.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Because I think this is really, I think it's striking a chord with all of us, which is great. You know, I'm clearly not a parent, but I know, you know, Baxter and Anella, you both are. And it just kind of made me think, if I had a child right now, maybe this would be an opportunity where I never, ever would have thought about looking at the books that we would be reading to our child, or maybe, you know, buying a doll that doesn't look like our child, you know, maybe letting the, you know, the child play with a darker skin doll, or you know, having books that are a little bit more eclectic and worldly, just so they start to see different faces, right? And you're kind of supporting that from an early on perspective, and not just doing the same things that, you know, we constantly have been doing. So I think, yeah, you know, we have, Marisa, you mentioned the, you know, you have this beautiful power that you can strongly, and again, your thoughts, Baxter, about the intention. You have the ability to kind of influence and help shape minds, right? But then it's also going to be starting at the young stages of life, where the parents really do have the most impact on that. And, you know, Anella, you mentioned that, you know, with how you help to fill the minds of your daughters and, all that good stuff. But, again, I have to be honest, I never, ever would have thought, maybe I should, and again, I'm not with child, nor am I, nor do I have a child, but it makes me think like when that time comes, that would probably be a really beautiful thing to do to help enrich the lives of our family and start already, bringing in that uncomfortableness, but making it kind of part of the normalcies of life.
That's actually a valid point. I think that sometimes does like fails to be acknowledged. It's like how you were raised was how you were raised, but how you raised beyond that can be highly significant to how you impact the world. So if you are going to bring a child into this world, or if that's the plans, not saying you ain't working on it though, but nevertheless, it's like, it's something that has to be taken into account. So I want to actually read this quote real quick, and then I have something else to say after that. So the quote says, "No one becomes not racist, despite a tendency by Americans to identify themselves that way. We can only strive to be anti-racist on a daily basis, to continually rededicate ourselves to the lifelong task of overcoming our country's racist heritage." And that's actually from the book that you just showed us, Marisa. So you can show it again. Yes. All right. Ibram X. Kendi. So one thing I wanted to share was that I am unapologetically Black. That's my skin, that's my complexion, that is my heritage, that is who I am. I know how I presented myself, especially through Streetwise Partners, because I learned various ways of how to interact, how to have cross-cultural communication. I presented myself as someone that I felt was able to show a level of code switching, show a level of professionalism, show a way of being comfortable in environments that for some people might be considered foreign or alien to them. I feel like how I presented myself to each of you, Emilee, David, and Marisa, was in ways where that wasn't what you were focused on. You was focused probably more on the character of Rasheem that was being presented to you than Rasheem's skin complexion. Because I felt like how I was doing was trying to make sure that the character was standing out more than anything, if that makes sense. So I feel like in our interactions, because Marisa, you had mentioned this, is like, and it's the same thing with probably Emilee, you and as well as David. It's like, it's not like I'm putting that in your face, saying, oh, let's go play some basketball, for example. Like, let's go eat some chicken together. You like grape juice? I'm not doing things like that. That's like feeding into like the various levels of stereotypes, but in ways where it's like, okay, that's how I'm coming to you as. I came to you as the character of a man who presented himself just based on that character, and my life experiences. I feel like this whole situation has impacted my way of life, my culture on just so many different levels. So many different levels. Like I had the opportunity to have a conversation with you, Marisa, in great detail, just about what I was feeling, how I was feeling hurt, how I was feeling like as a Black man that also was formerly incarcerated, that also was a victim of police brutality, that it's not easy, as well as to someone that actually does youth development. So in the same boat as you, Marisa, in terms of working with young people to try to educate them on how they can be successful in this world. So it has been really a challenging situation overall, just dealing with this, trying to process it all, continued shootings. And why such excessive force? Why did Jacob Blake need to be shot 7 times in the back with his children in the car? Why? Like, why was that needed in terms of trying to arrest him if that's what the plan was supposed to be or whatever the case? so many different situations. You know, someone like Chadwick Boseman just recently passing away, and what he represented through his roles that he played. If anyone paid attention to the roles that he played, all of them were significant roles. You know, from Jackie Robinson to James Brown, you know, to actually Black Panther, and how that made young people, but young and old, feel like, wow, they're showing representation of a Black superhero, a Black family, you know, that has both a mother and a father, that's not showing dysfunction, you know, that's not feeding into stereotypes, and that's showing empowerment, you know. Um, and that was very significant to me, like very significant to me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say my favorite one that he did was the Thurgood Marshall movie.
It's another one. It's
I
another
thought
one.
that's the first thing I thought of with him. You know, I mean, obviously Black Panther as well, but yeah, it's very, very sad to hear that. I had no idea he was sick.
Kept it private.
Yeah.
I don't think many people knew that
Very
was the case.
private.
Can
I
I jump
just
in?
honestly found out, like, I swear, like 20 minutes before I got on this call, because I was on, Instagram, and then I saw all these things on Chadwick Boseman, and I've been following his career since he came on the scene. I mean, way before Black Panther, and I'm in shock. I did, like Baxter said, I didn't know that he was sick.
I sort of just wanted to respond to something you're saying, Rashim, that sort of kind of relates to what Emilee said about which I'm just going to say, like, literacy in general. That I think something in education right now that we're kind of looking at is examining the source material that you share with people, because I think there's also this danger. And a friend of mine, a white woman, her husband is Black, and he's an educator also, and a high achieving athlete and all these sorts of things. And so we've been talking about how when he was a young boy, most of the examples that he had in school or growing up around Black culture was this idea of Black excellence, and that he didn't just have the opportunity to just grow up and become a Black adult, that it was like, there's so much pressure on you to succeed and reach the highest place you can get, because it's either zero or success, right? And so we've been talking about how in education that most of the literacy in, library literacy resources are either around Black people overcoming something awesome, like they're about, their children's books about Martin Luther King, about Rosa Parks, about, these like exceptional people, or it's about overcoming sort of like the Black experience or something like that. And that it's not just, you read a novel and the main character happens to be a Black woman, right? Like if I think about all of the pieces of literature, like the books that I read for fun, like when I have time, just like a novel about people going out on a Friday night, most of the characters in those stories that I've read, they're mostly white people, or I assume that they're white people. And so I think there's this kind of danger in providing only this idea of like Black excellence and not just like normalcy, and some of that, which I think, in this book that I'm reading, is talking about like cultural racism, and that because this country normalizes the experience of the white person, like the way my hair is today and the jewelry I choose and the clothing I wear, this is normal. But if I were sitting here with, with a head wrap on, or different kind of piercings or jewelry or tattoos, or, that may relate to a various culture, it's like those things are not what's perceived as normal. And so, I think about how we sort of typecast people as like, oh, that behavior, which we, maybe the way someone wears their clothing, the size of the clothing, or the, what they do, that we're like, oh, that's thug behavior, or that's this kind of behavior, because we equate how like the cultural, identity representation with that kind of thing. And at my school right now, we've completely gotten rid of the word microaggression. And now we're using the term identity-based harm, which I think just says a lot that, these aren't microaggressions. It's not this little tiny like slap, like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean it, but it's like identity-based harm. You're actually targeting someone based on what they look like, how they, what their hair looks like, making comments and you know, that all of that really comes back to the foundation of this country and this like white supremacy, that like the white experience is what's normal, you know, and that the Black experience or the other experience is not. And so I think it's you know, something that I've been trying to think about as an educator is how to bring in the normal other experience. Like, what is the normal, you know, not, you know, these exceptional, like even in dance, we look at, you know, the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater is like the exceptional Black dance company. He rose up, overcame, you know, the company has the biggest budget in the world, you know, and it's like, but what about the other Black dance companies? Like the starving artist, the, you know, struggling creator, like where are those people, you know? And at the school where I teach, again, we're re-examining the materials we use. I mean, our English department, you know, very high classic English, they're reading Jane Eyre and, you know, all of these classic novels, and none of those authors are Black. So right now they're just like, whoa, what the heck? Like, why don't we have like, you know, Black authors on our reading list for the year? Why are we not encouraging students, you know, to investigate, like they're going to add like a poet unit on lesbian poets, you know, like bringing other or trans authors, like bringing all of these people into the fold. That
right, I was going to say it kind
like of the white experience.
Right. No, Marissa, and I think that brings kind of you know, again, it's like, you know, a movement such as, you know, Black Lives Matter really gets us then to thinking about making diverse representation of everybody, right? That's in kind of this marginalized group that doesn't really get a voice at the table. And, you know, the moment that we start acknowledging that there are other people in different shapes and sizes and colors that are really kind of contributing to life as a whole, right? So, and it's not kind of dismissing one group versus the other, but it's almost kind of just like an awakening for everybody, but starting with the group that's been, you know, kind of in harm for the longest. And that, you know, at some point we would have thought like all people are created equal or all men are created equal, right? And then it, you know, begs the question for everything else. But
well, and
yeah, that's a really good point.
And Rashim, what I think you're ultimately referencing about, you know, our conversation earlier, this pandemic or whatever you want to call it, that
We'll say that.
Yeah, earlier, whenever it was, and, you know, is this idea of assimilation that I have invited you to come into my world, right? And so I'm like, great, this is my friend who's a Black man, and like, come join me and come be with my world, right? As opposed to you feeling comfortable or wanting to say, Marissa, come have chicken with me. And I'm like, great, what's your favorite chicken place? Let's go, you know? And I think about that time, Rasheen, that you and I met for drinks. This is like pre-pandemic, whenever we could, just you and I went, and you picked a spot in Harlem, you know? And you were like, this is a place I like. And I went there and joined you. And I was like, this is cool. Like I'm going into Rashim's world, like a space that he feels like I like this spot. This is where I go. And this is where I want us to meet. Right. And it's like different when you actually, and I think this gets back to Dave's point about like going into someone else's experience and not just saying, oh, great, you know, Streetwise does this work. You guys come here and we'll provide the resources. But it's like that's assimilation. Like, we're asking you to come join our experience, which is inclusive, sure, but it has to be about acknowledging, you know, cultural competency. Your experience is valid, my experience is valid, and together they sit at the table. That not my experience, come and be with me and come and be in my world, but that like, it's my job to go into your world. I don't know if that's making sense, but.
No, it does for sure. Well said.
It makes sense. Excuse me. And I wish we had more opportunities to actually do things like that. And I hope towards the future, we can do more of that. I think, you know, I appreciate you all for sharing what you have shared thus far. Because I feel like that is beneficial. It's beneficial to be said. It's beneficial to be said amongst us, because we don't have these conversations. And, you know, this is the first for us to actually talk about this extensively. And it's okay, which is the biggest thing, to be uncomfortable having these conversations. All right. There's different directions and ways that I can take this conversation, in terms of if I hear you make us, you say like, okay, Black Lives Matter. All right. It's like, do you believe that? How do you believe that? And so forth. Right. And it can seem like I'm interrogating you, but it's me also trying to get a better understanding on if this is someone who's been around you for 12 years, let's just say 30 dozen, we say it's 12, right? It's like, what did you do in that process to learn more about my culture, my way of life, to feel like you can be at a point to say that you are ally? Does that make sense? So I'm just putting that out there because that's something that has to be considered. You know, doesn't mean like um there's like a disconnection, but there is a disconnection in a sense, right? There's conversations we just haven't had, there's things we haven't really spoke about. That might be enriching to how we're building our bond and how we're developing our bond. So I'm putting that out there. When the initial situation happened with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, when all of those incidents kind of like happened back to back in succession, one of the people I did have an extensive conversation was Marisa. Other of my Caucasian or white friends had reached out, but not everybody reached out. Not everybody wanted to, checked in a sense. They say, hey, how are you doing? How is this hitting home? Like how is this impacting you? You know, and I think that's important to comprehend as well. It's like if you notice someone, that is experiencing something that's happening to a race of people that person's a race of, or whatever the case, maybe you should, check in, see how they're doing, see how things are going on, because
Wow,
that is
that's
huge.
so true.
That could be very beneficial just to that person with you just saying how are things going, you know.
Yeah, that's
And
so true. That you hit home right there because, uh, like, I only have a couple of white friends, not because that's just what my friends consist of mainly black people. But I had one white friend say to me that she felt awkward asking about it, and I didn't know how to take it. It was really weird because we had a conversation not too long after the incident, and I was expressing how I felt and how hurtful it was. I'm just a witness, a human being, as well as a black human being treated like that, and how he just died, and everybody's just standing around, and just total disregard for a person, and when she you know she said first like she didn't know that I felt that strongly about it, and my response to her was a bit of anger, and I said, well, what do you mean how you, you're supposed to know? But then again, I really didn't. How would she know? How would I feel? But as just another human being, and you know that I am one of your friends who are black, so she did say she felt awkward even reaching out to me or just to ask about it. And since then, I don't think we really talked that much. I don't know how to take that. I don't know how to view it. And until this moment, you just said it like that, Rashim. I didn't even think much of it. So if anybody had any insight.
Well, Anella, I mean, it's interesting because I think, again, and most of my training around this entire conversation comes from a lot of the work I'm doing at the school where I teach and, in the dance community. So I have sort of a particular perspective, but, I direct a dance company at my school, and I have a couple students of color on that group. And when this all happened, I wanted to be the educator that supported them, right? That I said, if you're having feelings, you want to make art about this, you want to talk about it, like I can be a sounding board. And I spoke to some, folks at school, one of my directors, and, the question came back, well, do you know that these students identify as Black? And I was like, oh, well, I didn't know that I should find that out. I was under the impression that race was a construct that I decide, based on how you look, that's what race is, right? It's a construct. So that was sort of surprising to me. And then this administrator is a Black woman, and she said, I also just want to give you some insight, from my perspective, that right now a lot of people are reaching out to me and checking in, and I'm sick of it. She said, I just want to give you like this other side of it where, which then I was suddenly like, oh shoot, am I not supposed to be reaching out to people I care about? Am I putting them in a box? Am I, actually doing more harm because I'm just making an assumption that because someone appears Black that they would care about this? Or, that I think that we're sort of in this weird place where people are now also questioning, like there's this idea of like heightened race, right? So in conversations where there might be one Black person in the circle and something happens in the Black community, everyone looks to that person to like carry the weight of the Black community on their shoulders. And I think adults obviously can handle that in a different way. And, I'm sort of speaking about young people, but I think that there's this sort of unknown, like, does somebody want me to reach out? And I've had a bunch of friends in my community that are like, just because I'm Black, now's not the time to reach out. And then some people who are like, I'm Black, you should be reaching out. And I think that is sort of it's kind of a strange place to be. I mean, when I reached out to Rashim, I didn't know what his reaction was going to be. I didn't know if he was going to say, F you lady, like, why you coming to me now, or whatever, And I think that again, by even just assuming that because the person is Black, you should reach out, is actually like putting a whole race in a category and saying that all these people have the same experience behind this. And I think that is something that I think people, and probably your friend, has felt like, I didn't know that it was appropriate for me to do that, or to make an assumption that it's okay for me to ask you just simply because
Marisa,
you're a Black woman. Or,
and if I recall, you had also mentioned that this particular educator at your school you had mentioned you wanted to reach out to these individuals who are Black, but the educator also suggested reaching out to everybody to see how everybody was handling what was going on. So
yeah,
that it wasn't just reaching out to a Black person, because again, to Anella's point, it could be a white child who was raised in a Black home, and so maybe this is kind of affecting them more than maybe another child. So it was just kind of interesting, because I think it, and I'm not defending your friend by any means, but it took me a little bit of time. I, had saw something that Rashim had posted, and then a couple days later I was, you were on my mind, Rashim, and, so I did not kind of react as maybe as I should have. But I think that, Marisa, you're just kind of, pointing out that unfortunately, there's no kind of right or wrong thing to do. But I think maybe what, Anella, you're suggesting too, is like having that conversation. And if it is something, hopefully you and your friend could talk about it and say, no, like, I really was disappointed that was your reaction, and this is why I'm feeling this way, right? And just kind of bringing about the ability for everybody to, I don't want to say discuss the elephant in the room, because again, as like a white woman, I sometimes feel like I don't have the right to say anything about the topic of conversation, because I don't experience this and I'm kind of an outsider. But I think I now feel like I've been empowered, kind of, to your point, Rashim, that I now feel like my thoughts are actually appreciated and acknowledged. And just because I don't have a direct, I haven't felt what others maybe have felt before, I still have a feeling, and I still feel passionate about something, and I'm still allowed to voice my opinion and be supportive in whatever capacity that may be.
I just want to interject real quick. Let me just interject real quick, because you both bring up valid points. And another, this is, speaking to kind of like your situation as well, because one of the things I spoke with you, Marisa, about initially is that, even if this seems uncomfortable, the thing that I feel like you should be doing is leading with love because of the bond we have and our relationship. Like, I'm not saying, oh, yeah, every white person that's in the Rolodex needs to call me, contact me, like, yo, bruh, you good? No, that is not the case. I know
Exactly.
people that I've known for several years, over a decade and so forth, that, are white. I have good bonds with them. I check in with them. I ask them about their family. Some people like family like me. I know their parents, all of that good stuff. So it's like these are things that are significant to me that would be, the point of me wanting to have that person reach out and feel comfortable.
Mhm.
You are my friend, first and foremost, and if that is the bond that we share, check in. Just like I would check in with you, like, hey, how's everything going? How's your family? If something occurred, that, really I felt had impacted your life and your livelihood, I would want to check in and find out what's going on because I don't feel like, regardless of what has been put out there as a societal norm, that we need to put, we need to stay over here,
Yeah.
one needs to stay over here. I don't want you as my personal friend to feel like that is the way I feel in a situation like that. So I just definitely want to put that out there. It's like you should not feel that way if you're Rashim's friend. But of course, people have other reactions to how they handle that situation, and may not feel comfortable if they feel like they have a bunch of people reaching out to them and they asking that person to explain something that they need to learn. I don't need to teach you about the Black experience. You need to learn yourself about the Black experience. There's things I can converse with you about as you are learning that, but it's not me saying, okay, now I need to open up the history books and go through a whole dissertation and all this other good stuff. And my curriculum got to be, we holding classes from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. No, that's not what's happening. So I just want to make sure I put that out there.
Well, and Rashim, I think that that's sort of for a lot of us, that's kind of this beautiful moment that we're in, because when I first met you 12 years, dirty dozen, 12 years ago, like
It's 13.
13 years ago, whenever it was, and I mean, I can just assume because of the white experience that probably Dave and Emilee have the same, well, Emilee's my sister, so we have the same upbringing, but this idea of what
That
we
was
were
funny.
sort of raised to be colorblind, to be like, no, everybody's good. Like, why would I need to ask you about your experience or learn about it? Because everyone is equal, right? And now here we are 13 years later, and we're in this moment in time where we're realizing like it's okay to actually state and acknowledge this is the reality and then take the steps to do that. So if I were to meet you now, or when I meet someone from a different race or a different culture now, I feel armed to be like, hey, what was your childhood like? Like, what kind of foods do you eat? Like, we should go do that thing that you enjoy, where I feel like when we met 13 years ago, like none of this was in the foreground of like what was acceptable. You know what I mean? And I'm sure at the time, if I said, Rashim, take me to your wherever, or like teach me about you, you would have been like, great, let's do that. But it wasn't part of like what was normal, sort of like now we wear masks and it's just what's normal. Like in the future, if I see someone in New York with a mask on, I'm not going to question it. Where a year ago I saw someone wearing a mask and I'm like, what's wrong with you? That's weird. So it's like we are continuing to evolve culturally. And I think that, when we're having this conversation a year from now, and I'm bringing people into my fold, that the way we interact and the kinds of things that we learn about each other are just going to be different moving forward. And now I feel like it's not even just okay, but I'm like empowered to learn more about the people in my circle and to go into, their experience and their lives. And I think that as we get more comfortable, other people will feel like that's just what's normal too,
I think it's very different too in New York, right? Meaning that like there are a lot more opportunities to see people of different races and cultures in New York. than there are from where I grew up, for sure, especially from
Same.
the people that I live in other areas. And so, and you're interacting with them day by day, so it's easy not to consider it, right? It's easy to walk around colorblind or try to, I mean, or like think that that's what you're supposed to do, especially in New York City, right?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree.
Was that a
Well,
question? I'm sorry, I didn't
I
hear.
was
It was
just,
more of like a
I
rhetorical.
was answered it to kind of like a commenting on what she commented on, the idea that, like, I agree that it was, you raised to kind of not see color, and then at the same time, like, and living in New York City now, like it's very, given the fact that we live in such a diverse community in many ways, it's easy to kind of continue that, right? And I think it's different from being in New York than I think it is, my friends and
I
family
can
that
see
live
that.
in the Midwest and in other parts of the country, where, for them, seeing somebody of a different race is a
Hello?
much different experience than it is, for somebody that lives in New York City. And I was just looking for, given we all live in New York, I was looking for whether or not, like,
Yeah.
especially you guys being from Buffalo and, other parts
Sorry,
of
my
the
internet
country, like,
went
whether,
out.
like,
I'm
you
back.
agree. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say you're totally right. It's like, and I mean, I haven't been home to Buffalo since Christmas, so, and I probably won't be home anytime soon, but I'm continually surprised when I go back. And in New York, you're used to just seeing many different kinds of faces surrounding you. You sit on the subway and you see a load of different people speaking different languages, doing whatever they're doing. And I remember, I want to say it was last summer when I was home in Buffalo, and I went to like a restaurant with maybe my sister, my dad, or someone, and every person, just about at every single table, was white. And I was like, what? Like, it was almost like the reverse, where I was suddenly, it was culture shock for me to see all of those people sitting at tables having, their white families with their white conversations. And I was sort of like, I almost felt like I don't belong here, because I am not used to seeing that in the world that I live in New York. And I would even, say, last summer, Emilee got married in the fall. And so we had all of these family events. We had a bridal shower. My brother hosted like a 40th birthday party for his wife, a surprise party. We did all of these things, and every one of those communities were white people, and that the sort of home life I have in my kind of like PNYC, like my pre-New York move, like pre-2007, my life was pretty much exclusively white, and now when I look around the room of my personal circle, it's not an exclusively white group of people. And so it also feels funny to have this kind of almost like your past and what that is, and then your sort of current, your present into your future, and those relationships, and how, I feel like moving to New York saved my life, because I could be a totally different person had I not moved to a place that invited me to be surrounded by people who were not like me,
I thank you for sharing that. I think another thing too that I think, you know, if for some people or maybe all people, it really, tracks back to how they were raised. If you're raised in an environment where predominantly these were the people that were around you, for me it was Puerto Ricans and blacks. You know, that's who was around me. I have Puerto Rican best friends, Puerto Rican family, whatever be the case. That was like my environment that I grew up in. Streetwise Partners was my first real exposure to being around people of various different backgrounds, but of course it was predominantly white people, but that was my first real exposure to that. Like, even the way I dressed, way I talked, I was using slang, I was dressing unprofessional, things like that. And I learned all of this in terms of becoming a professional through that organization, as well as being comprehensive of people from just various different cultures and backgrounds. Like, I definitely recur just like two situations, and 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 I didn't really take the biggest fault with that, but it was offending. Um, but because I think I had some level of rapport with the person or people around that person, that I didn't really take offense to it. So I'm gonna share two examples. One of them, or two stories, I guess, real quick. One, so there was a volunteer for Streetwise Partners who's Indian, had a birthday event, and it was around the same date as I was celebrating my birthday. So I got together with a bunch of my black friends, and I was like, hey, we're gonna stop by at this person's birthday event real quick, and then we're gonna head out and do our own thing. So we go to stop by at that person's event, and when we see that person, I can see that that person's clearly drunk, or whatever the case. So I'm like, all right, yeah, he's kind of, in a space that like, okay, this interaction is probably going to be cut short. Um, and he made it some, like, he wasn't talking to me. And I think he was talking, I think, to my brother at the time. And he made a comment saying, like, you all look alike to all of us. And I seen how my brother's body language had changed, and he immediately got offended. So it's like I had to like just get them out of that space, because that was just one of those situations where it's like, you know, if you're disconnected, and then it's like, and I'm sure if he was sober too, he probably wouldn't have made that comment. I think there would have been more of a like, even if I'm thinking this, I'm not going to say it, but it was said, and and I like I'm using the other example real quick too as well, because this actually happened at your wedding, Emilee, which you were not aware of, but it was actually Matt's mother, and she made a comment to me about, she thought I was the gentleman that was part of the ceremony, that was I believe the singer, and complimented me on like my singing or whatever the case. And I was like, okay, that wasn't me, but you know, um, and I really feel like there's a point of like a isolation or and disconnection, that if individuals are exposed to that and they just may not be mindful of it, their eyes can't really see beyond what they should be seeing, if that makes sense. Whereas like I'm clearly taller than that person, I have a darker complexion, I may be wearing blue, but that's the only thing that was similar about me and that individual, you know? And I think that really plays a part with how like people get caught up in these ways based on how they were raised and how they were taught, and what was like predominantly became like a societal value to them. These are my societal values, you know. And if they're not willing to show an open mind or some level of like, okay, wait, I need to receive this differently, then it will lead to continued issues like they have been issues, continued disconnection. Like not all situations that one could put themselves in will actually show, okay, well, wait a minute. Am I being racist? Am I being biased? How am I looking at these things? Did I just make a mistake in just saying that that person looked like that person when those people don't even look alike? And I feel like that is important for one to be more comprehensive of, so sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, Rashim, I totally agree and hear with you, and I think, or hear you. I think that it's so interesting that you're talking about this, because I think this is about what I said earlier, these microaggressions that are sort of like, ha ha ha, like, oh, that's funny, like, oh, you guys look the same. And I know your friend was drunk, and, that sort of heightens it, but that these are actually like identity-based harmful statements that really like target a person based on what they look like or who they are. And I'm thinking about, a couple of instances in my own personal life that my boyfriend is Chinese, and we've had several instances over the past bunch of years where things like that have happened, and I prior to us being together, they didn't happen to me because I'm a white woman and, you know, what are people going to say to me? But we had, you know, a couple of instances where things like that have happened and I didn't know at the time. You know, you're like stunned by it, so you don't really know how to react. You know, like we were on a ski trip, for instance, and there was this this guy was drunk. He's an Irish bartender who organized, one of the organizers of the trip, and we were, you know, putting together all the expenses at the end, and we were getting ready to, you know, board the bus and come back to New York, and everybody needed to pay certain amounts of money. And this guy said something like, "Marissa, why doesn't your boyfriend do it? He's Asian. I'm sure he's great with numbers," or something like that, you know? And in a moment like that, you sort of go like, ah, you like politely giggle because you're like stunned. How could someone say something so ignorant and just so stupid and not realize that those comments are actually harmful, you know? And then it's like you get mad at yourself because 3 days later you recall this thing and you're like, oh, here's what I should have said. Here's what I should have done. Like, in that moment, do you have the like quick thinking to actually say to the person, oh, I think you're misinterpreting that. That wasn't me. I'm actually so-and-so's friend. You know, we know each other because we used to work together. And like, how do you navigate, you know, those moments? Or, like one other like super offensive thing that happened to us, you know, sort of quick story. We were walking home from a restaurant, this is like a couple years ago, and my boyfriend started sneezing a lot, you know, and we're like, oh, bless you, bless you. And this group of like white dudes walks by and said, bless you, man. What are you, allergic to white girls? You know, and again, we sort of politely laugh because you're like, what am I supposed to do? Get into an altercation with some stranger on the street? But it's like, yes, now I would be like, actually, that's super offensive and completely a racist statement and completely not appropriate, you know? And it's like how, like, I guess I'm curious to know how we might navigate those instances to like acknowledge, but also educate while being non-confrontational. And like, how does all of that work? You know, like, how are we supposed to do that in those moments? And when you maybe don't have the conviction or the like confidence to speak up in that moment, which we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to be allies. We're supposed to stand up and advocate, you know, like that woman in the restaurant a few months ago who everybody like donated $50,000 to her because some guy was making racist comments about an Asian family at a restaurant. And she was like, get out of the restaurant, sir, you're not welcome here, you know, like, and then it's like, yes, like this is what people are supposed to do. But I guess, and maybe Rashim, you can speak like, because it happens to you directly, this stuff has not happened to me directly. I mean, I sort of said to him, like, we should have spoken up for ourselves. And he was kind of like, this happens to me all the time. I just like keep my head down and deal with it. And as like the white person, I was like, that's not okay, which is so white privilege that I'm like, that's not okay. You know, so I don't know if other people have offerings of like, how do you manage that? Or Rashim, what could we do in those instances? Or like, what are we supposed to say?
I mean, one thing, I know you just asked Rashim, and I'm just going to kind of jump in.
Anybody.
I mean, my thought would be, you know, maybe nowadays we would feel a little bit more empowered, and because it is something that's at the forefront of everyone's mind in every news channel, is that if it's a safe environment and a safe situation to say something, that it might be an educational moment. But I also think in today's world, you have to be extremely careful, which is really unfortunate because you don't know what violence could ensue when you're going to try to use this moment to educate someone. And I think maybe starting in our own like immediate circle, if it happens when it's a friend or, you know, your friend's mother, you know, at an event, and I'm so sorry that happened. I wasn't aware of that. Those are maybe safe moments where you can actually maybe take a breath and say something to kind of stand up for yourself. But, you know, when it's after a dinner and there's some drunk people and they're saying comments, you know, sometimes I think you just have to weigh the pros and cons of, is this a teachable moment that I want to risk like something escalating, right? Or is it something where I'm just gonna, you know, not that I'm encouraging what Steve does all the time, but, you know, maybe I might just put my head down and kind of bite my tongue in this moment. You know, I had a moment on the train back in 2010 where I get cold sores pretty regularly when I have like an internal sickness. And I was sitting on the train, and these two Black gentlemen across from me started belittling me and making fun of me, saying that, I mean, I know this is a G-rated podcast, so I won't say exactly what they said, but basically ensuing that the reason why I had cold sores on my mouth was because
It's
I was,
not G-rated.
oh,
Say what you gotta say.
well,
Uncut.
they basically were saying that I was sucking a lot of you know what, and you know, they were just so inappropriate and so hurtful to me. And I remember the pain that I felt, and I was shaking inside. And I felt like they chose me as like a little white girl, and of course I did have my little cold sores, and all I could say in that moment before I got off the train was, I can hear you and you're not being very nice. And I just like got up and like started crying and like left the train. But that moment has like stuck with me forever, which has been, you know, it not that it was like direct racism, right? Because I'm like a white girl, and there were two Black gentlemen who were clearly, you know, out to just say and run their mouth. But that was a really bad moment, and you know, obviously it's not something where I'm kind of acknowledging it as a racist moment, but you know, that was all that I could muster the fight to say at that time before I, you know, left the train and you know, came above ground and started crying. But it was really, I mean, so I can only imagine sometimes the things that are said that you want to say something more powerful and more provoking, but you just can't even utter the words because you feel so shook up and shattered inside, you know?
Well, and I think to the point earlier about like people with authority, that like that harm, like you just referenced a story that happened 10 years ago that still is sitting with you. And if you could imagine people who have these experiences in childhood, that just this stuff lingers and lingers, and you're an adult and you're still harboring these experiences from when you were really young. And I think that, again, this idea that not just the police and like people who have authority of weapons, but educators and doctors and, you know, people who work in these other spaces that you know, have to be more aware of what we say and what we do and how we model and how we communicate. And, you know, that can be just as harmful as pulling the trigger, you know, that stuff just internalizes. And then you wonder why people can't, you know, rise and can't feel, you know, empowered to then make change or, you know, do something really brave with their life, because they've been, like you said, you know, belittled all of this time, and that stuff just like compounds, you know?
I completely understand with both Marisa and Emilee with that story where you're coming
One
from.
second, Anella.
Uh-huh.
So it is 2:32. I don't know if everyone can stay on for maybe 10 more minutes or a little longer. But if you can't, that's fine. I definitely want to be mindful of the time because I slotted it for, you know, even though I could go longer, of course, but it's only supposed to be for an hour and a half. So, you know, if anyone has to like, you know, log off or whatever the case, that's fine. But if you can stay on for like a few more minutes, I can cap it pretty much at 2:45.
Sure. Yeah, I'm good.
Rashima, unfortunately, I've got to hop because we're getting ready for a Zoom wedding.
Okay.
So,
Oh, yay!
Congratulations to whoever's getting married.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna actually put on a nicer shirt, maybe, and things like that. So,
Talk about the new normal.
Nice. Keep your shorts on.
Yeah,
though.
exactly. Yes. But no, thanks a lot for hosting again. And I think we probably need to start budgeting more time because the an hour and a half doesn't seem to be doing it, right?
Hey, you got a lot to be talking about. But thank you for your time,
All right.
David.
Thanks
Take
a lot.
care.
Come back,
Bye.
sir. Enjoy the weekend.
Bye.
So, Anella, as you were saying.
Okay, sorry about that. Yes. So I used to be that young person, right, when I was younger, that any racism or sexism or any of the isms that came my way, I would pop off. Pop off meaning I would go at the person hard, right? As I grew, and as I'm still growing,
You would confront
I
them.
know that, right. I know I have to not confront them, right? Because I have two children now. I have two lives to be concerned of. That, and it's just like what I think Emilee and Marisa said. Not everything is worth fighting in that particular time. There are only two times in a person's when a person is speaking that they're completely honest with you. Is when they're drunk and when they're joking. Watch how people joke with you. That's what I've learned. And when you're around drunk individuals, because, hey, alcohol, let all your inhibitions go. The true you comes out. So by me knowing that knowledge has helped me cope with the world. Because the world, according to my 10-year-old, not to trust it, they're evil. It's the truth. And people only present the worst to you when they are the worst themselves. So those two individuals on that train, they were talking about themselves, Emilee. They weren't talking about you. Because if you would look at a woman, okay, regardless of your color, and you would look at her and degrade her, and make her feel low, you have to think in your mind how low those individuals are. And that's what helped me. And I don't stoop to anybody's lowness. They could stay right down there. I have no time because those things I don't tolerate. And that's what I teach my girls. That's what I teach my 10-year-old.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anella.
Because remember what I said before, too. I have to be careful. And, because, she has the same personality as me. But I don't want nobody hurting her. So she knows when to speak, and it's okay. Crying, let me tell you, Emilee, that's strength.
I don't know.
And
I'm sorry. I'm like tearing
yeah,
up.
yeah, because you had to let it out. You kept that in for way too long, and I'm so glad that you shared, because that right there, that has nothing to do with you, everything to do with them. Trust and believe.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, Anella, I was going to say your daughters are pretty darn lucky to have such a kick-ass, powerful Black woman as their mama. So it sounds like, all the things that you've said today about how you parent, I'm like crying too.
No.
Rasheen, get the tears going, get the tissues.
You got me tearing up once I heard that. I said, oh no.
It's like
Email you a Kleenex coupon.
that all the things you're saying, Anella, about how you parent is like how it's like how I want the leaders of that's a whole other conversation, but how I want the leaders of every institution, governmental and academic, and all of those spaces need to be really led by people who have this sort of awareness and this empathy.
You have to. Actually, my daughter's starting middle school. First time. So I am going to be an active member in the PTA because I want to give back. All I know is how to talk to little girls. I don't have a son. I don't know. Maybe someone will teach me. There's a lot of great parents there, Black, white, and they could teach me how to talk to a young Black man, but little girls, oh yeah. Oh yeah, I talk to them all the time, make sure that they love themselves and make sure, even though I don't think of it as being sexist, you just speak when the time is appropriate. Not every situation needs for you to jump in and battle that out. No, pick and choose your battles. You'll be more powerful in that aspect. If everything you jump on and you're talking about and you're fighting about, your voice becomes less. So pick and choose. Okay, that's a topic. You say to yourself, that's a topic. I'm gonna fight for this one. And when you fight, you come strong. Like you, Marisa, you came with book in hand today. You're like, ooh, I'm gonna talk about this. You know what I mean?
Well, it's funny because I sat down to turn on my. It's I'm reading it, and I have sort of a stack of, I'm back in grad school this week and whatever. So I have like a stack of all my materials, like right here on the counter.
Awesome.
And then we started talking and I was like, oh shoot, it was like literally right on top of the pile
That's
of
cool.
stuff. So
It was meant to be.
yeah.
So I would like to say this, and to you, Emilee, that I know how I expressed that, and I named someone. You know, I don't want you to feel offended by that because
Okay.
that wasn't the intention. I think I cited that because it was not a teachable moment. I felt at that point in time. I knew what the environment was. It was a joyous occasion, someone that I have love and respect for, just, united in a bond of love and all that good stuff. And that's what it was about. It was about celebrating and honoring that moment. So that was significant to me. Also, I've become kind of desensitized to certain things just because it is what it is. I have endured being caught a lot of different things. So like it just is what it is. Like some moments had to be confrontational. Some moments had to just be, let me teach you some things. Other moments it just is what it is. But I just want to make sure I share that with you because I know this is pretty much going to be on a public platform and I don't want it to be something that's not said because at the end of the day, you are my friend and I do value you and I value your feelings. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm not,
Um,
so thank you for saying that though.
um, so we're coming down to the wire, folks. So, I know we didn't go through maybe like 5 or 4, 6, whatever, how many more questions. It's all good because I feel like this was a very good discussion. I feel like we all was able to share and pour from our level of insights about these situation or about this particular situation. And I feel like that was helpful and that was constructive. So I'm happy with that. Um, as always, if there's anything you want to plug, you know, more books, Marisa, you know, you know, Emilee, you taking on a level of entrepreneurship, man. Forget that company. You know what I mean? But Anella, motherhood tips for girls, whatever it gotta be. But it's like, what if there is anything you want to like to shout out, plug, whatever the case, feel free to do that now. I think, which I love doing is having guests come back again and again, just based on just what the content was that was discussed, shared. And if people felt really comfortable, I don't have an issue bringing you all back again, you know. So that's definitely something I would like to do towards the future. Just giving you a quick heads up. My next podcast episode next month, I have a bunch of black men on that one. And the topic is, where am I at with my black man credibility? So that will be the discussion.
Oh, let me add it. I'm in there.
I mean, Rashim, I do think there's something, to be said about sort of cultivating a community that can have a safe conversation. And so, I think bringing people back, in terms of like another check-in after because I was even thinking this morning, and I know that when you sent us the initial questions for the first conversation to sort of think about, we spent that conversation mostly talking about pandemic lifestyle without addressing any race-based stuff that was going on. And at that time, which was now like almost, I guess maybe a month ago or so, I wasn't really armed to talk about race-based stuff. And today, I sort of woke up kind of like armed, ready to have a conversation about that. And so I think that as the world and our worlds continue to evolve, another month or two from now, the world is going to be in a totally different place and new stuff will evolve. And so I think, then continuing to have the conversation and letting it sort of shift, but in this kind of safe space is really kind of lovely. And Anella is a powerful Black woman. I don't have a lot of powerful Black women in my life. And so that would be an awesome relationship to grow. I'm crying again. That's cool to have an opportunity, to talk about like meeting other people and getting to hear their story. Like I wouldn't know about the role of like a Black mom with her Black daughters if we weren't having this conversation, So I feel like those kinds of things are essential. And so I'm, eager to continue to talk.
And I will also kind of plug to that maybe we can at some point, I don't know, socially distant or something, like all get together and just have like a beverage, or something. That would be kind of fun.
Definitely. That would be awesome because honestly, like I mentioned before, all I have is 2 white friends.
Well, now you got 4.
I know, exactly. And it wasn't a thought in my mind, like the ratio of Black to white friends. But it's great now that I have the opportunity to expand. And maybe that's because I haven't put myself in the right place to meet other people. I don't know. Who knows?
No, I mean, you're not, you shouldn't feel ashamed because I feel the exact same way. I mean, I quite honestly don't have very many female friends who are Black. I have mainly men friends, due to Rashim being kind of like literally my brother and some of the folks that I've been introduced through him. But yeah, it's amazing. And I love to be your new friend and would love, to continue
Same
our
here.
little
I definitely
love
will.
You know what I
ship.
thought you was about to say? It was like, I'd love to be your new friend and braid your hair.
I actually don't even know how to do a French braid, so I would, I can't even do like a white girl thing. So,
Ponytails all around. Pigtails.
exactly. Or headbands,
Pigtails.
a headband is how
Headbands.
I like pretend to look, dressed up. So,
But I think that that's sort of ultimately like how your community grows is like Rashim knows Anella and Rashim knows us. And now like then Anella, whenever the heck we get back to doing things in spaces or whatever, then it's like we invite you to do something in our community with our people. And then you invite us to go and hang out with your friends or to do whatever you do. And then it's like that's how then the relationships grow and expand. And then we meet more people that are part of your circle and you meet more people that are part of our circle. And then, all of that just feels like exciting,
True. That's how people's minds get expanded too, because what we have in New York is very unique. It's extremely unique and it's beautiful. We can go anywhere and just go downtown and you're in Italy, you're in China, you're in Africa, it don't matter. We don't have to jump on a plane and travel all over the world to visit everybody else's culture and learn about everybody. And so we should take advantage of this unique, diaspora of people that we have and not run away from it and not feel like awkward with each other. And we should be curious. We're not reaching out and grabbing somebody's hair, say, "Hey, can I braid your hair?" But you know what I mean? Let me touch you. But you're reaching out and saying, "Hey, I would. Do you know how to braid hair? Can you show me how to? Would you mind?" Of course not. I'll show you. And that's how cultures grow, and that's how people become, open. And I'm telling you, it's the cure for racism. Learning about other people and where they're from and their cultural difference is the cure for racism. If
The
you stay
thing too.
closed-minded, then sorry, Rashid, go ahead.
No, this is one quick thing I wanted to add, and I feel like Anella, you had like one experience of this that was brief, but Emilee and Marisa had multiple experiences of this. So whenever I do have any birthday events, I try to form that bitch like United Nations.
I know you do.
And I really try to bring everybody together. It doesn't matter if you're a lesbian and you have your partner there, because I had that at one of my birthday parties, and one of my friends was like, "Coach, those 2 women are kissing one another." Yeah, that happens.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that happens. But I definitely feel like it's important to continue to build equitable relationships, going beyond diversity. Like that's been my way for a long time now. Like, and I greatly appreciate it. Like, I greatly appreciate being able to be exposed to other people's cultures, and how they live their lives, especially if they are living their lives positively and looking to be successful. So that's the main important thing, because that's who I want to surround myself with. People that are actually going to be assets and not liabilities at the end of the day. So I greatly
Amen.
appreciate you ladies, right? We're building bonds. We'll continue to do what we need to do. We on shaking hands and kissing babies. We doing our numbers out here. But, much love and respect for you all. This episode will probably going up probably sometime next week. But I will definitely keep you all posted. And once again, stay curious.
Cute. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Rasheem. All right, everyone, have a great weekend.
Take care.
Happy weekend.
Enjoy.
All right,
Thanks,
bye, guys.
everybody.
Be safe.
Thanks,
Rasheem.
Rasheem.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye now.